In our last video of the lesson, we are going to talk about some example problems involving sector area. So I want to remind you about our formula for sector area. This part right here, that pi r squared, that is just area of a circle. So if you know the area of the circle, you don't always have to use the formula itself. You could just plug in whatever value you have for that area, and then this is our fraction of the circle. So when you use this type of formula, you're not always going to be actually plugging in exactly as you see it, but if you know that it's the fraction of the area, you can substitute values in where you need to. So let's try a couple of examples. Our first two are pretty straightforward. Calculate the area of the sector. So we see that shaded region. We know that our angle is 120 degrees and our radius is 16. So I can do 120 over 360 pi times 16 squared, because it is pi r squared. And then I'm going to take my calculator. Just like in the previous examples, we are going to leave this in terms of pi just to save us with our calculations a little bit. So I can do 120 divided by 360. You might recognize that this is 1/3 already. And then we're going to do times 16 squared. If you're evaluating this by hand, remember that the 16 squared is going to happen first before you divide by 3. Because of order of operations, you have to do that exponent first. And we get 85.333. Since we're not going to leave that as a repeating decimal, I'm just going to use math fraction to help convert it to a fraction. And we get 256 over 3. So our answer is 256 pi over 3 square meters. And that also gives us a signal that the area of the whole thing is 256 pi square meters, because this is 1/3 of our section, and we divided by 3. I want to encourage you to use some of those mental math abilities that you have to kind of make some assumptions about what's going on here and make some deductions from that. So a circle has a radius of 12 inches. Find the area of a sector whose central angle is 120. So I have 120 over 360 pi times 12 squared. Once again, 120 over 360, we know that's 1/3, so I could do 1/3 times 12 squared. Could also do 120 over 360, and we get 48. So our answer is 48 pi square inches. Another way to do this problem would be to know, okay, well, 120 over 360 is 1/3 of the circle. So then I could do pi r squared, which would give us 144 pi, and then just take 1/3 of that, and that'll also give you 48 pi. So that's another way to think about it if you're more comfortable with that. You don't have to immediately use the formula. You can use our conceptual knowledge of what sector area is. So the area of a circle is 225 pi. Find the area of a sector whose central angle has a measure of 45 degrees. So if we look at our formula, they don't exactly give us r. We could go and calculate it from the area. We could say 225 pi equals pi r squared. But we don't actually have to do that, because we could just substitute into our formula the 225 pi instead of putting in the pi r squared. So I could say that 45 over 360 times 225 pi. So once again, you don't have to go and use the formula exactly as it's written. You can make substitutions based on what you understand. So I'm going to do 45 divided by 360, which I do know is 1/8, times 225. And we get 28.125. I am going to turn that into a fraction just because the decimal is a little bit long. And it's 225 over 8. So 225 pi over 8 square inches. So once again, we're using our knowledge of the formula to help us here, rather than just substituting in values directly. Our last example, find the measure of the central angle of a sector if its sector area is 15.7 pi and the radius is 6 meters. So in this case, we have 15.7 pi equals x over 360 pi times 6 squared. So they give us the radius and they give us the sector area, and they're asking us for the angle. Just like in our previous video, we can cancel out those pi's on both sides because we could divide both sides by pi. 6 squared divided by 360 is going to give us 0.1x. It's 15.7. So I could divide by 0.1 on both sides, and we're going to get that x equals 157 degrees. Remember, I'm using my units because I know that x is an angle measure. So in this video, we talked about some different ways to use that sector area formula to solve problems, and good luck!